Anansi and the Yam Hills by Michael Old. Once, in a before time, there lived an old woman who had magical powers. Her name was Five. She was also so evil that some people called her a witch. Five hated her name. No one knows why her parents named her the number 5. When she was a child, the other children would make fun of her name. Sometimes when she was within earshot, they would look out of the corner of their eyes and they would giggle as they said, "Give me 5!" And they would slap their hands and do a quick handshake and just laugh and laugh and laugh. The taunting always made Five angry. When she grew up, Five decided to put an end to the name calling. So she created a weird spell. Anyone who says 5 will drop dead, she said. Then she changed her mind. No, from this day on, anyone who says 5 will disappear. The spell immediately caused a problem in the country. No one could say that number again without disappearing. Children could no longer recite their 5 times tables. People had to drop the word 5 from their vocabulary. In Five's village, the unlucky number was no longer 13.
Mommy.
Listen to the story.
Mommy, I did not listen to it.
Well, okay, sit down and listen to the rest of the story. Once, a customer asked a merchant, "How much is that blue t-shirt?" That shirt is $5. Oops! Suddenly there was a loud whoosh. Before the merchant could finish his sentence, he disappeared right in front of the customer's dumbfounded eyes. A crafty spider named Anansi lived in Five's village. He had heard about the witch's spell. Times were very hard. Anansi was not a farmer, and he had no food at all to eat. His wife and children were starving. Since Anansi was small and not a very good worker, he could only rely on his brain to get whatever he needed to survive. He said to himself, "Things are tough, boy. I must make this witch's spell work for me." Anansi went to the road that led to the village's marketplace. He chose a spot on the side of the road where everyone on the way to market would have to pass. There, near a large guango tree, he decided to pile up the 5 mounds of the rich brown soil. These mounds he called Yam Hills. In the top of each yam hill, he planted an African yellow yam. Then he drove a stake next to the yam on which its vine could grow. Anansi carefully watered the yams until each one began to sprout. Anansi made a web-like hammock in the guango tree and patiently waited for someone to come by. Early one morning, after each yam shoot had poked its head out of a mound, Anansi sat down next to his yam hills. Soon Brother Dog came by on his way to the market. Dog balanced a banker basket of sweet-smelling fruits on his head as he walked down the road. "Good morning, Brother Dog," said Anansi in a sugary voice. "I know that you are busy, and I feel so stupid. I'm not an educated man like you. Would you help me count how many yam hills I've planted here?" Anansi asked. "You should have gone to school to learn how to count," Brother Dog said grumpily as he walked away from Anansi toward the market. Anansi climbed up into the guango tree and waited. The next person to come by was Brother Bull. He carried a large basket of fruits on his head. "Good day, Brother Bull," Anansi said. "Spare me just 1 minute," Anansi begged. "What can I do for you, Anansi?" Bull asked. "I was a yicky and sickly child, so my parents didn't send me to school. I never learned my ABCs. I planted all these yam hills. Can you help me to count them?" Anansi said. "But of course, Anansi," Brother Bull replied. "You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Swoosh! As he said that number, Brother Bull disappeared into thin air. The basket of sweet ripe fruits he had been carrying on his head fell to the ground. Anansi snatched up the basket of fruits and rushed home to eat them all. For a long time, Anansi did very well tricking some passers-by into counting his yam hills. He grew fat from all the baskets of food that he gathered. He tricked brothers Turtle, Owl, Mongoose, Hare, Peeny Wally the Firefly, and even the tough brother Scorpion. Mrs. Guinea Fowl was a nice young mother of newly hatched children. She couldn't say no to anyone. She and her husband shared the chore of selling their produce in the village. That day it was her turn to go to the marketplace. She loaded up her hand basket and headed for the market. As she got closer to the Yam Hills, Anansi was nowhere in sight. As she was about to pass Yam Hill number 4, Anansi the spider lowered himself down from his perch in the wango tree. He called out in his sugary voice, "Good morning, Mrs. Guinea Fowl. Could you help me with a problem?" "Of course, Anansi," the polite Mrs. Guinea Fowl said. "I have these yam hills here and I don't know how to count. Would you help me, please?" Anansi begged. Mrs. Guinea Fowl, who had seen Anansi trick Brother Scorpion, walked over to the last yam hill and climbed on top of it. She said, "You have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the one I'm standing on." "What? What are you doing? That's not the way you count." Anansi shouted angrily. "What do you mean, Anansi?" Miss Guinea Fowl said. "I don't know of any number called the one I'm standing on. Start again," Anansi ordered. Mrs. Guinea Fowl began again. "You have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the one I'm standing on." "That's not what you're supposed to say," Anansi shouted even more angrily. "Well, if you're so smart, what am I supposed to say?" Mrs. Guinea Fowl asked. Anansi shouted, "You are supposed to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops. Suddenly Anansi disappeared, leaving Mrs. Guinea Fowl with all the loot he had gotten from tricking his victims. The end. Did you like that story?
Mm-hmm.
The moral of this story is a greedy puppy will soon choke. Have you ever seen a puppy eat so fast and so much that it might choke? If Anansi hadn't been so greedy, he wouldn't have got himself into so much trouble, would he?
Mm-mm.
That's right. Okay, that's the end.